All right. So, hello everyone, and welcome to this second SOFA session, hosted by the UFGC. My name is Matt Stewart. I'm the founder of Yarra Pools and Life Sprint, and I'll be your host for today. So super excited. I'm joined today by two incredibly overachieving human beings in the urbanism space, combined experience of over 50 years in that realm. And today we're going to be asking them all about their careers so far. And the discussion will be about careers in general in urbanism. So super excited to have your input in terms of questions that you might have for these guys. But I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of really interesting stories about their journey in general. And of course, if you don't know them, you're going to get to know on a much more personal level Greg Clark and Maria Vassilakou. And the session itself will be broken up with some polls and questions, so make sure you're ready to input your ideas because we want to make this an interactive session. And before we start, I want to say a big thank you, obviously, to the Urban Future team who have done an incredible job, obviously, since the conference itself in Lisbon was pushed off, and organizing this event and others, and also to the city of Lisbon for making this event possible. So I think we had over 200 people join this session so far, and I think of you 90 have already input what you think is your dream job in urbanism itself. So we're going to get up a little word cloud, which actually showcases what you guys said is the dream job in sustainable cities. So for those you can see it, I think it's a really, really fascinating look at what's exciting in this space. One thing I found most interesting was urban designer was the most common idea for a role, but only 4 people out of 90 put it. The rest of them were basically one person, all sorts of different roles. Some of our favorites included the night mayor with a space in the middle, all sorts of strategy roles, a lot of exciting things to do with sustainability. But this is what we have in the room, and we're also looking forward to hearing what our guests say, possibly their dream jobs. To throw it over to you guys and get a bit of an idea of who's in the room, I'm also going to encourage you guys to type into the chat now and introduce yourselves. So if you can, would love you to type your name into the chat, your location, so what city you're in, and then when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? I'll give you a couple of seconds to type that into the chat. I believe Greg, for example, has already given advice for over 100 cities in the world. So there's a pretty good chance most cities that you guys are from, Greg has a good understanding of what's going on there. We have people from Melbourne who wanted to be a train driver, Andrew, that is. Caroline wanted to be a writer and an artist. We had dancers. We have a novelist from Chicago. We have football players. We have journalists, astronauts, scientists, gardeners, and more astronauts. So very excitable and exciting group here that I'm sure you're going to have great, inspiring questions for our guests. And with that, I might already kick over. The process of the show is we're going to first talk to Maria. She's going to talk a little bit about her career so far, the twists and turns. You'll get to ask some questions directly. Then we're going to switch. Greg is going to take the stage for a little bit. You'll get to ask him questions, and we're going to end with a bit of a Q&A. So let's buckle up. So Maria, she's the first Green Vice Mayor and Senior City Councillor in Vienna, where she spent 9 years before stepping out last year. So in terms of careers and career change, there's obviously something new on the horizon for her as well. She's one of the driving forces behind the incredibly iconic Maria Hilferstrasse in Vienna, and obviously a true leader in redesigning cities for people instead of cars. And so there's obviously so much more to her journey, which she's going to share with us now. And I might start by asking you, Maria, the same question which we threw to the group. When you were growing up in Athens in the 70s and 80s, what is it that you wanted to be when you grew up?
Okay, so good afternoon here in Europe, everybody, and hello everybody everywhere else. Now, When I was a child growing up in Athens, I wanted to become a pilot. And later, a little bit later, in adolescence, I wanted to become actually a medical doctor. And in both cases, I think it was about complexity. What fascinated me about pilots was being able to drive these very, very complicated machines. And then medical doctor, it was about complexity and it was about support. And in the end, I think that this has not changed up to today. I think my passion still is mastering complexity to produce strategies and solutions for improvement, for better lives. Now, this brought me clearly into city politics, although 1986, when I left Greece and moved to Vienna in order to study, I couldn't have imagined ever that only 10 years later, I would be in politics, or I would be in politics anyway in my life. And what I have been doing in politics, actually practically all of my life almost up to today, because I've been in politics altogether, if we count student politics as well, something like 30 years. It's been driving change, and it's been also driving sustainable system transformation. Now, today, I would like to share with you my personal reflections. Let's say my personal takeaways from my career. And so I'm going to share with you my answers to the three big questions that I'm being asked, all of my life so far. And let me start right away with the first one. The first one is, how come you became the first migrant ever to enter Austrian politics and become an elected politician just 10 years after migrating to Austria? Now, I say, first of all, you have to have a passion for what you do. And sometimes you don't even know that you're going to be doing it, but you have to have a passion for it. And your passion must lead to activity. Now, in my case, my passion was once again, was to drive change and to do something about it. So I entered students' politics just a few years after coming here to Austria, because I thought, I'm going to stay here for a few years and then leave again. But as long as I'm here, I want to make a difference. I want some kind of contribution. I want to do something for the society here. So this is why I actually entered students' politics. I think you should be just as passionate, especially in early years of your career, as you are about doing something. You should be just as passionate in creating networks. You should be a passionate networker. I think that this is extremely important in life anyway, and especially when it comes to municipal careers. I mean, cities are places where practically, I always say, everybody knows each other in the end. I mean, not literally each other, but still, they are in the end not that huge networks. So you really have to love networking. And then, of course, there's serendipity in my case. But when serendipity knocks at your door, in my case, it was being asked, if I would like to begin his politics, then you have to use the opportunities, you have to take the risks, and you have to make decisions and not look back. Very important. Now, and also banal, but also just important, I think it's also very useful to learn languages. This in case, because most of us, are in one or the other way interested in international careers. Now, the answer to the second question. The second question is, how come you became the first Green vice mayor in Vienna just 14 years later after joining politics? And how come you became, the chief candidate of the Green Party 7 years after you got first elected as a city councillor? Now, my takeaways here are, be ambitious in terms of daring to dream, and actually daring to dream big, because small dreams lead you to small achievements, right? Small accomplishments. Now, big dreams may remain daydreams forever if you don't combine them with a vision. And there's a difference between a dream and a vision, but I cannot get deep into it now because I only have a few minutes. So you may ask me what I think is the difference anyway. So big dreams actually should lead to a vision, a strategy, and at least one plan. So I think many of you have answered strategist as their dream job, as far as I have seen, or urban strategist. I agree. This is one of my dream jobs as well, even now, besides being mayor, which I never managed. But besides strategic thinking, you need more than one plan. I think tactics are as important as strategy. They cannot actually stand instead of a strategy, but it's once again looking for opportunities and being flexible and having several plans that will lead you where you want to be. And then there's another issue that is very important in my eyes. Don't wait to be asked. So go after your plans, envisage yourself in a different position, and start, planning and acting in order to get there, which means don't run for somebody else, build up your own team. And when building your own team, see to it that you choose people that are better than yourself in something so that you can learn something from them. Which leads me actually to my third big question. And this is, how come you decided to step out of politics and start working as an advisor? Now, besides my passion for complex systems and transformation, I have a third one, and that is learning. Which means that besides implementing a vast transformation agenda in Vienna within the 9 years that I was vice mayor, I used these 9 years as an opportunity to learn. I learned from my own experience, and by this I mean not only learning from my mistakes, I learned also from my successes. And to be honest, I believe that you can learn more from your own successes than from your own mistakes. But this means that you have to look into your successes as well and analyze them to know what are your strengths. So I learned from my own experience, and I learned even more from my team and from my colleagues. And I learned one more thing. I learned from myself to listen to my inner voice. And there came this moment when my inner voice said, you should move on. Otherwise, you might get stuck. And stuck in a situation where you start repeating and reproducing yourself. And in the end, you start really believing that you're something special. I think this is one of the worst things that can happen, in my case, to politicians. So I did what I always do. I envisaged myself somewhere different. I asked myself, what is your dream job actually now? And the answer was not mayor. Although I would, if somebody knocked on my door and asked, do you want to be mayor? I wouldn't say go away, I would. But still, the answer was not deputy mayor and it was not mayor. The answer was, I want to work with cities internationally. And I want to do what I do, and I love what I have been doing in the last 9 years, but I don't want to do it in one city. I want to do it in cities all over the world. So after that, I did what I always do. I created a strategy around this. I created plans. And that means I worked on an exit strategy because there was a story that has to be said, to be told. You just don't, step out of office overnight and you're gone tomorrow. I said, I need to learn. So I went to the LSE and did my master's in urban management and urban development. Yes, and today I'm into my dream job, which actually is a teaser for Greg. He will have to find out what it is. And this is it. I think that in the end, the last message I have for you is you just have to, don't stop. Just envisage yourself where you want to go and what you want to be, create a strategy around it once again, Create not one plan, but several plans. Use all opportunities, use serendipity, make mistakes. Create your own team. See to it that you gather people around you once again who know more than yourself, who are better than yourself in something. And go for it. And that's for now. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for sharing, Maria. I think that's a framework that we could all write down and actually be very successful with as it is. I'm going to throw open to questions now from the audience. We also had some comments by people like Anna, who said she really appreciates you sharing that story. And in particular, it must be such a difficult task to get into politics in a different country with a different language, which is definitely true. So I'm going to throw open to you guys. If you have a question, type it into the chat. And if we select you, then we'll encourage you guys to actually turn on your camera and ask directly. In the meantime, as you guys are typing in questions, my question for you, Maria, is have careers changed much in the years that you've been around cities? In general, there's a transition towards people staying in jobs for a much shorter time. But what's different in city careers these days to when you started?
Well, back in the 80s and in the 90s, you would join city administration and you would stay there for all of your life, for your whole life, especially in Vienna. Now it's quite different. People join at different stages and they don't necessarily have to join early or at a young age. So they join, they stay for some years. Sometimes, they move out of and start different things. But I think that the biggest difference is that you are actually requested to be innovative. So I think that innovation is actually the greatest difference right now. I remember, sitting in meetings with people explaining to me all the time why something cannot be done. And I have experienced with shifting culture. And in the meantime, I think that administrations are extremely innovative in most places in the world. So it is really fun, working for a city right now.
Thank you. And you have a wonderful slide, which I think we'll show a little bit later on as well and ask you some questions around that. But in the meantime, we have a question from Maria Stutz about networking. So if you want to ask that question directly, let's see if we can get you on the line. If not, then I might ask it directly for her. She said, what has been the most useful tool or practices to develop your network?
I think I have not been using tools in this sense. The most useful thing is being interested in other people and approaching them and asking them questions and listening to them and having real fun, contacting other people and being around with them. And realizing that it's not about, just exchanging a few nice emails and then putting the address somewhere, where you can use it again in case you need something. It's about really being interested in creating bonds. And that's how a network works. And I would like to add something to this. I think that it's not only about networking, it's about not being afraid to ask for support, and especially to ask for support from people that have experience. Because my experience with experienced people and with myself in the meantime is that experienced people love supporting others because they want to share their experience, right? Experiencing something that you get out of your whole life, and it hurts sometimes, and it takes mistakes, and it takes downs and ups, and then you have it, and it's very emotional. So you love sharing it with people that are interested. So just be interested in others, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and let's see if we can get Matthew Kendall. if you can unmute your microphone to ask a question around switching into urbanism with transferable skills.
Yeah, sorry, my camera isn't working at the moment, but my audio should be, hopefully.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, so it's just, as I said, I wondered what advice you have for those who are switching mid-career, because one of the problems I have is that I have transferable skills through various different roles outside of urbanism, but not specific urbanism experience. I have a master's in sustainable cities. But yeah, I guess I'm just lacking that experience, and that makes it difficult to find appropriate roles, because it's either entry-level roles or roles that are quite far ahead, for which I don't have the experience and qualifications.
Okay, now perhaps we could exchange a little bit more intensive on that, the two of us, but I think that there are many different things that you can do, especially if you have a master's in sustainable development. And I was talking before about using opportunities. I would, take any opportunity there is to enter the system of a city administration at any entry point, and then do my networking to work my way through. But you have to walk through the door, and sometimes it's just almost any door that you may choose in order to start once again to find a landing point, an entry point, and to start creating a network. I would say then that it is important that you choose opportunities that will help you actually learn, in your case, in terms of how to go about things, because in many cases, young leaders have lots of knowledge about the what, but not so much knowledge about the how. So try to find entry points where you can learn more practical things about urban administration. And the third thing is try to choose teams and leaders that will be the type of person that does not tell you all the time what not to do or what cannot be done, but the type of person that will tell you how to do things. So try to avoid, the second thoughters, and try to choose doers. And I think that's about enough for now. But once again, we could continue this, on a more on a level between us two.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Matthew. All right, that's a good segue into our next poll question. And thank you so much, Maria. I think already from hearing your mindset around networking and other aspects, it's quite clear as to why and how you were able to be so successful in Vienna politics. But I'm going to launch a poll now for all of you guys to answer. And the question is, what's your biggest challenge in starting and changing career paths? So it ties very nicely into Matthew's question there. And I'm not sure if you guys can see that at home for the recordings, but we're currently getting a lot of votes in for getting started, finding a job that suits your vision, and boosting self-confidence, getting out of your comfort zone, which also ties in nicely to the discussion, and not getting demotivated by setbacks, which are obviously very challenging and important aspects of careers in general. So with that in mind, and I'm not sure how many setbacks he's faced over his career so far, but I gather it has been one of a few different pathways. I'm going to introduce our wonderful next guest. He is officially, I'm told, the chair of the Maria Vassilakou fan club, which I think will have a number of new members signing up based on the chat, which seems to be going off for Maria. So you can tell them how they sign up after the session, Greg. But he's an urbanist, he's an author, he's a global advisor to over 100 cities. Chairman and non-executive director for HSBC's Future Cities Group, on the board for Transport of London and the UK government's Connected Catapult Cities. He's the author of at least 10 books that I know of, and from what I've heard, there's another book coming out next year, but perhaps you'll mention that. And I might kick things off as we did with Maria. So I know, or at least my sources tell me, when you were around 19 or 20, Greg, that you volunteered in Mexico City and New York, where you found a bit of a love of cities. But before that, when you were even younger than that, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, Matt, thanks very much. Let me just say hello and good afternoon to everyone. So sorry we're not gathering in Lisbon, but thank you to Lisbon City Council for making this conversation possible. And as you've already disclosed, my big secret is I really want to be the president of the Maria Vassilakou fan club. So you already know that. But when I was very young and I was asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I used to be very cheeky and say, I'd really like to be an adult. And this created a kind of ironic response in the minds of the people I was speaking to. And in a funny way, I think it's still true. I'd really like to be an adult. That is my plan. After that, I was raised in an Irish Catholic family in London. And for a few years, I wanted to be a priest. And that was what initially took me to Mexico City and then to do voluntary work in New York. And then when I made it to university, eventually I wanted to be an actor. But I ended up doing none of those things because when I left university, went back to live in London in the mid-80s, I suddenly realized that the thing I really wanted to do was to work on the issue of inequality in urban labor markets. And this began, Matt, a kind of 35-year career that I'm still enjoying. And what I'd like to do, if I may, I'm just going to talk about it for a couple of minutes. Would that work? And if so, could we show the one slide that I have? So this is not as attractive as Maria's slide, and I really apologize for that. I thought her pictures were beautiful. But what I wanted to say to people here is I wrote the one slide that summarizes the whole career. And what it tells you is I started working in a non-governmental organization called the Refugee Council, which was all about unemployed people of refugee background living in London. And I pretty quickly went from there to being a local government official managing the urban renewal program in an inner London borough. And I went from that to being involved in major urban redevelopment, the London Docklands Development Corporation. And in that moment, something interesting happened was I started to get involved in networks, international networks of cities that were trying to promote urban renewal and urban redevelopment. And then you can see I ended up leaving my work for a couple of years nearly, and I went back to New York, Columbia University, studied city and regional planning, and visited nearly every North American city that's above 2 million people. I had a research grant essentially to write a book about what Europe's cities can learn from American cities. And then it went on. You can see then I then moved into a business that was doing urban real estate for small companies. I started pulling together different things, being partly an academic and partly a practitioner. And you know, the whole thing is here. But eventually I went from an NGO to a local government, to a national development agency, to a regional business, international government again. And then I end up where I am today, with a job in a large corporate that is thinking about cities very seriously. I'm involved in a regional transport authority as a member of the board. I'm the chairman of a national agency on cities and sustainability and technology. I'm the founder of a startup on urban analytics, which is working really well. And I'm still a thought leader, working with the Brookings Institution and universities and others. And I also now do broadcasting. I write books and articles and all sorts of things. So it's been an amazing 35 years. But the interesting thing about it, Matt, is that none of it was really predictable in any way. Just like Maria, my experience was that when I started in cities in the early 80s, there were really only two jobs you could do. You could work in a local government as an official, or you could work in an NGO trying to fix a problem. Nobody else was really interested in cities. But gradually, as our urban century unfolded, more and more organizations have started to develop their interest in cities. Big corporates, small businesses, universities now have specialist centers. National governments now have much bigger teams working on cities issues. Media organizations, event organizations, specialist producers of events about cities, journalists writing about cities, radio shows about cities. None of this existed 35 years ago. So I guess my core message from all of this is that you have to be willing, as Maria said really clearly, you have to have tactics as well as strategies. You have to listen to your inner voice. You have to be willing to move on. And I think when I did those things, I learned a few other things. So one was, it's not essential to have one job. It might be better to have several different jobs at the same time, and people can see that here. It's quite important occasionally to create your own job and not to wait for somebody to create the job you want, but to be led by that vision, that dream that Maria spoke about, and try to make it happen if you possibly can. And exactly as Maria said, you should, of course, build your network, but you don't build a network, and I think she's entirely right, as a kind of utility. You build a network because you find like-minded people with whom you want to cooperate. And by finding opportunities for cooperation, you enrich your own life, you learn a huge amount, and then you take things from there. Now, I've been lucky, I think now, to visit about 300 cities and to work with more than 100. I'm also now working with more than 50 large companies that are starting to think about cities at the same time. But for me, the drive is this, that cities are the places where people are. They're the places that synchronize and choreograph the lives of very, very large numbers of people and make it possible for people to live together in ways that I think are an extraordinary feat of imagination. If you like, cities are both the biggest and most complex invention that humankind has ever created, but cities are also, to use modern language, the biggest sharing platforms that we ever had. And what motivates me is to make those sharing platforms even more effective. So that's been something about my career and how I got here.
Thank you so much, Greg. And while we wait for others to post their questions in the chat, my question to you is a topic we talk about a lot at Life Sprint here, is supporting casts. You're the lead of a wonderful story that's obviously taken twists and turns, but what are one or two of the most important supporting cast members who influenced your journey so far?
Well, there have been many, and I've been absolutely blessed to be surrounded by incredible people. So, you know, on the one hand, I can count 5 or 6 people on my hand who at various stages in my career, particularly when I was younger, said to me, you know, you have ability, you've got some talent, do your thing, do it your way, don't obey the rules, do what you really want to do, be creative. That's one group of people. A second group of people are the army of fantastic researchers who I work with in London, young people mainly, average age 23, 24, 25. We're working together on books, reports, slide decks, all sorts of interesting ways of imagining the city and what's in there, and I love those people. And then I'm very lucky to have an international network that includes the wonderful Maria Vassilakou and other leaders and practitioners, maybe about 30 people whose opinions I deeply respect, whose ideas I seek out. And if I'm trying to make a difficult decision, I often ask them for advice too. And somehow the combination of these kinds of people, mentors, helpers, and then colleagues who are advisors, it makes a massive difference.
Thank you. And we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Maybe if Jennifer Dunn, you want to very briefly ask your question around how to create your own opportunities.
Yeah, can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Good. And yeah, I was just wondering, so I already have a job and I guess a career which tangentially touches on sort of city changing and so on. But in the meantime, I was just wondering how you view, or if you have experience of volunteering or campaigning, and if you think this is a valuable way to go about, or a way I could expect to have eventually have a career in city planning or city changing, if you like.
Jennifer, I think it's a very important thing to do. And actually, Maria knows much more about this than I do. But my experience was that becoming a campaigner on refugee rights and then being a very active in the area of race equality in cities, particularly in the job markets and the enterprise markets, gave me not only a kind of passionate understanding about the need to transform cities, but also, again, it started to build the network and it gave me confidence about how to talk to large numbers of people. So I would say being a campaigner, being an activist, being deeply involved and being passionate about something like that does give you all sorts of skills that then help you to find paid work as well. As I say, I think Maria knows this story even better than I do, but I certainly agree with that.
Okay, I think we have one more question here. It's basically from Christine. Do you want to ask that briefly around balancing several projects simultaneously? So maybe perhaps you're a workaholic, Greg, but how do you manage that? Christine, do you want to?
Hi, yeah, I'm just wondering, when you do take on several different projects at the same time, sometimes they have different timelines, different goals, and sort of like how often do you, take a step back and then reprioritize, which projects are most important, which projects are getting you where you want to go. And
yeah, it's a great question, Christine. I think the answer is at least annually. And holiday times become very important moments of reflection when you have an active career, especially if you have a portfolio of different roles like I do, and you're constantly switching up and switching down between your different projects, and you're constantly switching out the things you don't want to do anymore and switching in the things you do want to do. But I think two other things are even more important. One is you should always work the synergies between the things that you're doing, because the reason that it makes sense to do more than one thing at the same time is because they're synergistic. They feed off each other, they provide positive feedback, and the more you're good at working that, the more it becomes easy to do multiple things. And the second thing is, yes, you might be a workaholic, but don't forget to get help. It was a big moment for me when I realized that although I was being a freelancer, I didn't need to do things on my own. And I started hiring help, and that eventually led to me founding a company that's now a really exciting startup business in the area of urban analytics. It started off just with research assistants helping me with my work, and now it's a company that gives 12 people employment. So it's great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Christine. And thank you, Greg. What we're going to do now is we're going to throw open back to the group. And perhaps you have a pen and paper handy, but we want to try something in the broader view. We want to ask you a question around skills. So you may be a little bit biased. You've got some incredible input, obviously, from these two accomplished characters with very esteemed careers already, but we want to hear from you guys. What are the top 3 skills aspiring city changers need in the future? And if you have a pen and a paper handy, we want you to be able to write it down on a piece of paper. This is not going to work because of my background, but you're going to share it up on the screen. We'll switch to the gallery view. So just what do you think is one, or you can even just put one of the top 3 skills that aspiring city changers need. We need you to turn your camera on, press gallery view on the top right, and then hold that up. In the meantime, while they're doing that, perhaps Greg, do you have any surprising skills that possibly don't usually make the list, which are important for city changers?
Well, I don't know if it's a surprising skill, but obviously storytelling is a very important skill. Not only is storytelling a way of helping people to formulate their imagination, but storytelling is also pretty critical in forming a coherent team out of a group of individuals who may come with different perspectives. So I'd say storytelling is a pretty good one. Not far away from storytelling is joke telling. And I don't mean jokes in the traditional sense, but being able to create laughter is a really important skill. And then the other one, of course, is knowing how to host really good lunches, breakfasts, and dinners, because actually this is a people's industry, right? We want to bring people together. So if you can do those things, I think there's kind of hosting skills are very useful. That would be my quick answer.
Wow, that's very good. I'll get your thoughts in a second, Maria, but if you guys have written a skill on a piece of paper, I'll get you guys to 1, 2, 3, put it up to the screen. And we'll see if the team, the Urban Futures team, can take a screenshot. We have stamina, resilience, clarity, people skills, definitely biased by what you just said, Greg. Sense of humor, passion, Jared over there, sensibility, vision, creativity, being inquisitive. I think we're writing a nice little toolbook already with the content of this so far. So thank you guys for sharing. Maria, do you have anything to add to the skills that you saw there? Are there any surprising, unusual skills in that list?
Yes. No, I have not seen anything surprising from the part of the gallery that I can see here. What I would like to add, though, is I think that one of the most important skills is actually the analytic skill. So I would say spend lots of time observing very carefully and then analyzing structures before you start talking or developing strategies, plans, or anything. Yeah.
Very important.
So sometimes, the skill is not only, let's say, is shutting your mouth, although this sounds very harsh. And I'm talking all the time here anyway, but it's just, being silent and doing observation and analysis before starting to present yourself.
Awesome. Well, we're going to open up to questions to both of our guests right now. So get them ready and start typing them in the chat. But in the meantime, Maria, as a way for you to investigate further, I might throw it to you to ask the first question in the group back to Greg. Do you have any burning questions you'd like to ask him about careers?
You see, that Greg fascinates me, for so many years. Yes, I think I would like to ask you, where do you get the energy from? I mean, I have to explain this. I believe about myself, for instance, that I'm inspired and that it's easy for me, to have new ideas and to go after them and everything. But I tend to get really, really wary at times, And I have been watching you traveling across the globe and landing in Singapore and in 1 hour talking to people, full of energy. So where do you get all this energy from?
Well, that's a very nice question, Maria. And actually, I think the answer is quite simple, that if you are, as I know you are and I am, fascinated by cities, then the energy is constantly replenished by the diversity of cities. And I never had to do what you've done. I was never a vice mayor. I never had to resolve problems. So I never really have had to deal with entrenched, difficult challenges. I've always gone from one city to another, giving advice, learning, understanding, analyzing, as you say, very important. So it constantly is replenishing the energy, and I'm never in a situation where I'm stuck. Mm-hmm. So that really helps, I think. Matt, am I allowed to ask Maria a question?
Sure, Greg, why not?
So,
Go for
Maria,
it.
I've got two versions of my question for you. So one version is, is there any job in a city that you would still like to do?
Mayor.
And is there any job in a city that you would never like to do?
Well, I would still love to be mayor. I would. There are many jobs in a city that I would never like to do, but I think one of the most boring ones is head of procurement. I think I wouldn't love to do it. But you haven't asked what I would like to do now. You know, what is my dream job now?
So, Maria, what is your dream job now?
I would like to be you.
Well, that's very nice of you. I'm prepared to swap if you want to. But, let me ask you one more question. You said that you would like to be mayor, and for those of us who want to have visionary leaders in cities that are leading us towards more sustainable, more inclusive, more equitable, more creative cities, this is great news. But is it the city of Vienna that you'd like to be mayor of, or could it be another city? I'm even wondering if it's the city of Athens.
Okay, now I would love it to be the city of Vienna. I would also love it to be the city of Athens. And then please don't laugh. I could even imagine it to be another city. But then, of course, I mean, being mayor means loving a city, having a deep knowledge of this city, right? And of the culture of the city. And it means, of course, you have to have a connection to it. So I guess in the end, it is mostly Vienna or Athens, because this is where I've spent my life, right?
Thank you.
Well, I'm not the only person who hopes that you succeed. I know that.
Oh, thank you.
Maria, I've also heard rumors that you've been traveling back and forth from a city not too far from where I am in Berlin. So we'll definitely keep an eye out.
Well, I can talk openly about this here. I have been asked and have been thinking very intensely about becoming, well, mayor, but not, you know, it's actually the same. It's called mayor in German cities, but it's actually vice mayor. It's like what I have been doing in Vienna for the city of Leipzig in Germany, which is a fascinating place that I have been traveling back and forth. I love it. I thought very intensely about it, which is why I also actually applied for the job. But in the meantime, unfortunately, I have to withdraw my application for personal reasons. So it's not going to be Leipzig. It's still going to be Vienna. And as a matter of fact, pretty much as Greg has all told us, I find traveling extremely energizing. So I do deeply hope that I will be traveling back and forth to Leipzig in the next years, but in a different role.
Okay. Let's go a couple of rapid fire questions. I've got one from Facebook. This is to you, Maria, as well, from Elchana. She said, as vice mayor leading for 9 years, in your opinion, how much percentage relevant innovation ideas approach and how much of is funding important to achieving the objectives?
Okay. I think that funding, well, okay, this is a bit of a tricky question because it depends on what you want to do. Sometimes is funding extremely important, but I have found, to be honest, that the most important part is having people around you once again and finding innovative ways to go about challenges and find solutions. And if you don't have the money, the next thing you have to ask yourselves is, okay, we can't afford to do this. So what is it that we could do on a smaller budget? And sometimes the greatest of all ideas arise out of small budgets, tight budgets, and being really innovative because of that. Actually, as a matter of fact, this is what I've been specializing, you know, in my new life, looking into tiny budgets and very small, let's say, margins of opportunity and trying to make the best of what there is.
Matt, can I add something to this? Because I agree with Maria entirely. We used to have a great exercise when I worked in London, which was to say, And if we had not a single penny, what would we do to make a difference? And if you ask yourself this question, you come up with much more creative solutions than if you think we're going to do something with some money. Because if you have no money at all, you have to change the rules, you have to use the land differently, you have to make the most of the assets, you have to do things through cooperation, you have to change the behaviors of people. It's a completely different way of thinking. And sometimes it's a very creative task to say, we don't have a single penny, but what can we do?
Yes.
Very good. We've got a question from Andrew, if you want to turn your camera on. The question is around how important research is for informing decisions. I'll let you ask it, but I wonder if you're also referring to whether research versus politics is involved in decision-making, cities and strategy. Over to you, Andrew.
Sure. Yeah. My question is exactly that. How important is research or a knowledge base about cities and systems in cities in making decisions about cities in politics, or how important is that knowledge in advising about city strategy?
You go in first, Greg.
Well, all I would say is that I think it's very important. Maria's already talked about the importance of being analytical. Now, that just doesn't mean formal research. Being analytical is about really observing carefully what happens and what doesn't happen. It's also, analysis and research is very important into understanding long-term trends and how you can shape them in cities. So I use population trends a lot. I use analysis of economic diversification in cities a lot. I use a lot of analysis of public opinion, and in particular reputational analysis of cities. These kinds of tools are absolutely critical. My experience is that you have to help city leaders develop an outside-in understanding of their city, and you have to also develop a bottom-up understanding of the city, and you have to develop an understanding of the systems that are not visible. And the only way to do that is to have real data that's very useful. And increasingly, of course, with digitization, we're able to use real-time data in all sorts of ways. And this is an incredible new tool, I think.
Just quickly, as we throw over to you, Maria, with your experience in politics as well, and obviously getting a lot through politics, I'm sure you used research in a lot of your work around pedestrianization, but that alone is not enough. So can you talk around the balance between political decision-making and informed research-based decision-making?
I think, when it comes to political decision-making, first of all, I couldn't agree more with Greg. And I still keep realizing the importance of data each and every day as I keep moving. I think the second thing you have to do is you have to do careful stakeholder analysis as well, so that you can actually get a deep understanding, of the entire ecosystem before you make decisions. This is something that many politicians neglect, as a matter of fact. And you have to do both, because otherwise you may end up taking decisions only on the basis of polls, which is a bad idea. I mean, you have to look into polls clearly as well. And you have to even listen to your own intuition. Because sometimes, you know that something is counterintuitive. But still, I think that the strongest basis of decision making should be data analysis.
All right. Thank you so much. We're going to start to wrap up there, and I might get a slide up where we'll have one more poll for you guys where you can put stuff in. But in the meantime, I think everyone will join me in thanking you two, Greg and Maria, very much for an incredibly insightful and obviously very thought through process. I really appreciate the way you looked back through your career and didn't just talk us through step by step, but kind of took out key frameworks and learnings. And I think it's quite evident some of the reasons why you've both been so successful in your career. So can we get the slide up? There we go. And I'll let you guys have the last word in a moment. But while we're getting this Menti word cloud to appear, I want to tell you guys that on June 24th, the third UFGC SOFA session will be taking place, and it's all about behavior change. So Matthias, one of the wonderful organizers, will be hosting along with Margaret Hefferman and Jenny Cross. So make sure you check that out on the website and join in the fun on that one. But I think we should have a few words popping up now. So the most helpful takeaways from today's session, I think, guys, is people have gained motivation and confidence. I think they've definitely been inspired by the vision. There's energy to restart. As they come through. Passion, I saw a few times. Networks, I think, is very, very important. I think that was referenced by both of you guys on several occasions. And in particular, like the way you spoke about that one, Maria. And that's that. So I might throw over to you guys, starting with Maria, if you have any closing words or ideas or advice for younger people developing their career in urbanism, or just any thoughts.
I think I would say famous last words is don't start collecting degrees. Nothing against degrees. I mean, I even went to university again at 50 and got another one, but still there's always going to be somebody there who has more. So I think that realizing that it's about confidence, it's about passion. Once again, it's about knowing what you want, listening to your inner voice, knowing where you want to go. And then it's about finding the right people, connecting with them, and taking the opportunity to work together with good leaders that can teach you something. And when you find out a team is not a good place for you to be, then just move on. Don't get stuck.
Greg?
Well, I agree with Maria. My 3 lines would be, remember that we're living in the century of cities, and we're only entering now the 4th decade. There are going to be many opportunities to work in, with, for, and about cities over the next 2-3 decades. This is our time. So this is very important, I think. The second thing to say is that it's important to nurture your soft power and not just to think about hard power. So hard power is money, institutions, legal competencies. Soft power is networks, influence, ideas, creativity, innovation. These things are very important. And the third idea is that we all have a responsibility to nurture our leaders. And when I first met Maria, I was very, very inspired by her. And I realized that, here is an amazing leader bravely trying to change the way a city works. And she succeeded in so many ways. And I think I learned, kind of watching her, that if we support our leaders, it actually creates more opportunities for all of us to be creative and to be effective. So those 3 things are my takeaways.
Thank you both very, very much for summarizing a lot of really, really valuable insights. I think next time we'll host a session that's called Greg and Maria Disagree on something, and it might be quite short, but let's see if we can find some of those topics. Greg will share with the whole group by email how to sign up to the Maria Vassilakou fan club. In the meantime, on behalf of myself, on behalf of the crew, the organizers of the UFGC, make sure you keep an eye out for the next conference, which will be happening obviously in 2021, God willing. The next session, the next SOFA session will be happening in a week's time. And as you leave, we encourage you guys to please take this poll. I'm going to put this up now. And tell us what you thought of the session, give us ideas and advice, and any last comments you have for either of the speakers in the chat. And thank you so much for joining.